Hello and welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be covering aspects of SOLIDWORKS Composer. My name is Kaylee Gonzalez. I am an applications expert here with MLC CAD Systems, and I do work quite a bit within the SOLIDWORKS Composer software and other technical communication software. Really, what we're going to be focusing on today is publishing content for written documents. Now, you may have seen other content on our YouTube channel, for example, where it shows how we can export pictures and then update like a Microsoft Word document. I want to go a little bit more in depth into that process and give you some tips and tricks and kind of show you the ins and out of what that process looks like. So SOLIDWORKS Composer is considered to be within the technical communication software aspect of SOLIDWORKS products. The reason why I bring that up is so that we really understand what Composer is doing here. So SOLIDWORKS Composer allows us to utilize and leverage existing 3D CAD files to create graphical content. Now Composer will also allow us to add additional types of information such as arrows and text. There's a whole variety of different type of information we can do to create this rich graphical content. Once completed, we can then export that graphical content for written documents that explain certain processes and procedures. So great examples of utilizing some of this content would be for the use with assembly instructions, repair instructions, product manuals, or training guides. And we're going to be working with an operator's instruction manual where there may be some maintenance that needs to occur on our equipment. So what I want to cover with you is an overview of the existing project that we have and an overview of the Microsoft document that we have currently started. So we have a couple of things that are in process right now. So I'll go over an overview so we are all starting on the same page. And then I'm going to elaborate on setting up our Microsoft Word document. Something to keep in mind here is that the workflow that you're going to see throughout this webinar is not specific to Microsoft Word. Yes, I'm going to use Microsoft Word for the example, but really any word processing software is going to have the same capabilities. So please keep that in mind as you watch the webinar. Once our document is set up, we're going to talk about publishing the content from Composer for utilization in that document. And then the last example we're going to see is what happens when we have geometric changes to our models. How do we update Composer? How do we update our document? If we have set everything up correctly, this really should be a pretty quick process. So let's start with our project and document overview. If we take a look at my screen, I have SOLIDWORKS Composer open, which is the majority of my screen, and then I also have Windows Explorer open on the right-hand side. I'm going to try to keep those two screens open throughout this process so that you have full visibility to how some of these pictures are getting exported and updated. But right now inside of Composer, we already have a project that is in progress. We have a couple of views that are already created. So for example, we have view 1, which is going to be more of like a cover photo for our document. Our view 2 and view 3 goes through removing some plates and internal components on kind of this side panel. We have an existing guards parts list that has already been completed. And then the last two views we have are going to have a detail of the internal motor component, and then we also are going to have the caution about needing eyewear. Now, where these views are going to come into play is once we are completed, we will export them out to Windows Explorer environment. However, if we take a look at our Microsoft document, we can see that we are really at the beginning stages of this document. We don't have a whole lot within here right now, just a couple of headers on some different pages. But we can see where some of these pictures are going to go. So the first page is going to be where that cover photo will eventually go. I'm going to have views 2 and 3 be exported for the grinding wheel replacement section. My guards parts list was view 4, and then view 5 was the motor detail, and the operating caution was view 6. So this is at least giving me kind of a premise for where some of these pictures are going to go when they do get exported. But right now our document is very blank and very much kind of at the beginning stages. So now that we have kind of an understanding of the project where we have some views that have been created and we know what's going on with our document, let's talk a little bit about setting up this Microsoft Word document a little bit further in preparation for exporting from SOLIDWORKS Composer. One of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to export just one picture out of Composer right now. I'm not quite ready to export all of them, but I'm going to export just the default view as a high resolution image. The reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to use it as a generic placeholder inside of my Word document. This is a great technique to use if your Composer document isn't quite ready to publish pictures. You can still work on the documentation aspect of your project. The reason why I recommend exporting one file from Composer for your picture is because it's going to really help you as far as maintaining aspect ratio, size. It's going to reduce distortion, and it's going to give you a really good idea of the size and shape of your images. For example, if you take a look at my Composer screen right now, notice how there is a gray portion across the top and bottom of my viewport, and then I have like a white rectangle. This is actually your paper space inside of Composer. The paper space is actually an internal setting that you can set up and utilize. In this case, it's set up as an 8.5 by 11. What that means is anything that's inside of this paper space, that's how your picture is going to get exported out. So by exporting out of Composer, I'm going to know exactly kind of the aspect ratio, size, shape of my picture in my document. So for now, I'm going to go under my high resolution image, and I'm only going to export this one picture right now. So I'm going to choose Save As out of my workshop. This is going to save that image. And I'm going to leave the file name as it is. So this is just going to be a generic picture. Now, with this being a placeholder, one thing that we want to think ahead with is inserting pictures into Microsoft. We're going to retain a couple of links to these original files. Now we need to understand how SOLIDWORKS Composer is going to name some of these pictures when they get exported. So again, looking over here on the right-hand side, there is a multiple tab that we will use once our Composer document is ready for export. But this is giving us the nomenclature. So this is going to be an file name underscore view name. And so, for example, the picture for view 1 is going to be bench grinder underscore with views underscore view space 1. And I'm being very particular about the name here because all spaces, any of that has to be included and has to be exact. Again, right now I'm thinking in terms of my picture placeholder. So what I'm going to do is just start copying and pasting some of these additional copies. So this is going to be underscore view space 1. And I'm going to do this for the remaining views. Again, this is where if you are going to use some type of placeholder system, you want to make sure that your naming conventions inside of Composer are going to be very consistent. Also here, this gives you a visualization of why it is important to rename your views to perhaps something a bit more meaningful than view 1, view 2, view 3, view 4. This is a rather small project at the moment where we only have 6 views that we're worrying about. However, if you get into much larger projects where you have 100 or more views, you really want to have some more meaningful names. That's something to keep in mind as you set up your project, because once you have created placeholders or you've actually exported your images out, you do not want to be renaming your views. That is not recommended because you're going to create a lot of extra work for yourself. Now that I have my generic placeholders, let's go into our Word document and talk about setting up that particular document with these pictures. So inside of my Microsoft document, one of the first things I'm going to do is start inserting those placeholder pictures that I just saved out. I'm going to go under Insert and then Pictures from this device. As I navigate to my folder location, I can see all of my placeholder pictures. And I'm going to choose the underscore view 1 picture because I know that's going to be my cover photo. Instead of just inserting the picture into Microsoft, I'm going to choose the Insert and Link option. The reason why I'm doing this is because it's going to not only embed the file into my Microsoft Word document, but it's also going to maintain a link back to this particular picture at this particular name and location. This is going to allow me to eventually export pictures that override the placeholders and update the links to my file. I'm going to say Insert and Link. Now at this point, I am working inside of Microsoft, which means that I can set up a lot of my formatting here just with these initial placeholders. I can do any of my text. I can change the size of my photos, add borders. I could crop them. Anything that I need to do, I can start working on even with these placeholder pictures. All my formatting will be maintained later on when I go and export my live pictures. But for now, we're just doing some basic setup. I'm going to also want to have 2 pictures on this page. So as we start bringing these in, you're going to notice how I can start really seeing my document kind of come to life a little bit. And this is all just working directly inside of Microsoft. And as normal, I added a picture which bumped this down a page so we can compensate for all of those little changes before we really start working with our live pictures. So this process here of using a placeholder, it is optional, but it does allow you to really start working concurrently with your documentation and your Composer files. So you don't have to wait for Composer files to be completed before starting on your actual documentation. I have just a couple more items that I'm going to bring in here, and then we'll be able to talk a little bit more about the publishing options. So view 5 again is going to be the motor detail, and then as I go ahead and bring in my last view, view 6, we can start adjusting some of the details. Again, any text that you would add to this, that's completely fine at this point. But we're just getting some of our initial pictures in here and set up in preparation for publishing. Once our document has set up with our placeholders or any initial items that we need, then we're ready to start really publishing our content from Composer. So that's what we're going to do next. If we had to make any additional changes to any of the views or add views, that would all be completed at this point. What I can now do is I'm still inside of my high resolution workshop, which is over here on the side. Again, I'm going to use my multiple tab with the views selected. This is going to take every single view and export them out as their own individual pictures, but do it all in one step. What you're going to see is once I export those out, all of my existing placeholders are going to get overwritten. So I'm going to choose Save As, and I'm going to choose that initial placeholder picture that I have. The only reason why I'm choosing that is because of how it's named. The remaining items will have the view 1, view 2, view 3 underscore added to them. So when I click Save, yes, I'm going to replace what is there. And you can see over on the right how my thumbnails updated as all those pictures were sent out. So my export process is actually already done. It finished before I could even got done talking about it here. So what does that mean for our Microsoft Word document? Right now, because my document was open during that process, the links did not necessarily automatically update. However, I can go under my Edit Links to Files, and this is going to give me a list of all of the links to the pictures that I already inserted. And I can do a shift click to select all of those source file links and choose to update now. What you will see is all of my placeholders have now been updated with the files I just exported. But what's really interesting about this, why I think this is such a powerful tool, is because notice how all of my formatting is 100% intact. Not only that, but my aspect ratio looks really good. My pictures don't look warped or distorted. That was one reason why I recommended doing at least one export from Composer first, because I have very little that I have to do now that these pictures have been updated in this document. So that's my one little tip that can save you quite a bit of time. It's not hard to change an aspect ratio on a picture, but it's tedious to have to do it on a whole bunch of them. Because that Composer paper space was the same, these actually insert very, very well. Now, before we go back into Composer, one thing that you might be thinking to yourself is, what is the edit links to files? You may even have Microsoft open and thinking, I don't even see that on my interface. How did you get that to be there? That is a built-in function to Microsoft. There's no smoke and mirrors there, but it is not automatically available upon installation. So for example, I need to go under Files, and then I can go down to Options. And I place this on my quick access toolbar. So when I choose quick access toolbar, I can see what has been added to that toolbar right now. Now, I'm not 100% sure how these specific groups are organized, so I'm going to go into all commands. If you choose all commands, this is going to give you a running list in alphabetical order of pretty much every type of function Microsoft Word has available. And you're looking for edit links to files. Once we find that, make sure you click on edit links to files and then click add. That will add that particular function into your quick access bar. You can also add it into specific places in your ribbon by choosing customize ribbon. Again, choose all commands just to give you a full running list. It's going to be called the same item, so edit links to files. And then we can choose where we want this to be placed. You can choose from any of the existing tabs across the top of your ribbon. So you have a lot of flexibility on where you want these functions to be added when you customize your Microsoft interface. So using the edit links to files is definitely something that I utilize quite heavily when working in conjunction with SOLIDWORKS Composer. So that's where you can find that particular function and then add it into your Microsoft Word environment. So we just took a look at publishing content. Publishing content from Composer is typically very, very quick. The ability to export all of those views as individual pictures is such a huge time-saving feature, and being able to link it to that document, there's a lot of work we can do in a very short amount of time. One of the last things we want to talk about is how we would compensate for updates when we have a geometrical change. Maybe our engineering team comes to us and says, hey, we had to make these changes to this. Here's a new updated file. We're going to see what that process looks like and then how we can update, again, our document. As I go back into SOLIDWORKS Composer, what we would want to do when we have any types of geometric changes is update the Composer document first. So this is a built-in function, so I can go under File, Update, and then choose SOLIDWORKS Composer document. I can choose either a .smg file that has the changes needed in it already, or if I have SOLIDWORKS also installed on my same computer, I can use native SOLIDWORKS files with the updates to also update my existing Composer project. There's a couple of methods that we have. So my bench grinder with the dash actually has the changes in there that I need. So I'm going to choose Update, and Composer is going to run the comparison in the background and then update any components it has detected with changes. And so what you're going to see is I have some changes that have been made already. I have some vents that are added, a logo, an on-off switch. And what's great about this is all of my views have already been updated. What's also really astounding about this process is all of my extra content, such as adding the explode lines or the arrows, they have been unchanged. This is one of the powerful aspects of SOLIDWORKS Composer, is the ability to compensate for changes as needed without having to do a lot of rework and having to kind of start over from the beginning every time this happens. So again, even in view 5, we can see the changes that are there as well as view 6. So my Composer document has been updated. Something to realize is the pictures that we exported from Composer, they are not linked to your Composer file in any way. Once they are published, they are their own independent standalone files. What that means is we cannot forget to republish all of our images once a change has been made. But this is going to be the same process that we saw initially when we updated all of our placeholders. I'll go back into my high resolution image, make sure that my multiple views option is selected. And when I choose the Save As, again, I'm going to just override the existing files that are there. Something to also keep in mind is with all these pictures being JPEGs, you really want to make sure that the save as type is also going to be the same picture type. If you try to save as a PNG or a bitmap, the existing files here will not get overwritten. You will simply have files of the same name that are different file extensions. So please keep that in mind. You really want to export as the same picture file type in order for these items to get overwritten. Now, this was a more subtle change. We didn't necessarily see any sweeping changes to our thumbnails. However, if we go into our Microsoft Word document, we can then update those links. Again, going under my Edit Links to Files, I can choose all my links and then Update Now. My views have already been updated. All my formatting that I would have done is also completely intact. So compensating for updates in this way, you can start seeing that there's a lot of time savings to be had by utilizing this type of integration between Composer and your word processing system, whether it's Microsoft Word or another software. We should be able to really compensate for these design changes without having to start over completely from scratch. So we saw an example of updating our project and our Microsoft document. So we actually covered quite a bit of content in a very short amount of time. We did an initial overview of our project, but we spent some time actually setting up our document. We made some placeholders so that we could start working on the format of our document or even templatize our document for future projects. That's the concept of using a placeholder. Using the placeholder is optional. If your Composer document was to the point that you were ready to export, you could have exported those and inserted your pictures right away. There's a couple different ways you can approach it. Publishing content in this way, we're utilizing high resolution images for our Word document. That's going to export them all at the same time. And even when we go to update our project with design changes, we can republish our views with the appropriate changes. And from there, we can simply update the links in our document. Remember, the edit links to files is one of those items that will allow that to happen, as well as inserting your pictures with insert and link to file, as opposed to just inserting. So from here, I would like to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions. If you have any remaining questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the questions panel in the GoToWebinar, and we can take a look at any questions that currently exist there. So thank you for your time and your attention, and we'll go ahead and check out those questions.